Marie Burr, August 1961, suspected first victim. Before we get to the confirmed murders, there's one case that haunts investigators to this day. In 1961, 8-year-old Marie Burr disappeared from her home in Tacoma, Washington. Her mother found the front door open early in the morning and Anne's bed empty. No signs of struggle, no screams, just gone. Here's the terrifying part. Ted Bundy was 14 years old and lived just a few blocks away. He delivered newspapers in that exact neighborhood. Some investigators believe this was his very first kill, even though he never officially confessed to it. Anne-Marie's body was never found. If Bundy really did take her at age 14, it means he was killing for almost 2 decades before anyone caught him. The early 1970s. Unknown victims. Bundy himself hinted that he started killing much earlier than 1974. During interviews before his execution, he suggested there were victims from his college years in the late 1960s and early 1970s. He never gave names or details, but investigators believe there could be at least 8 to 10 unidentified victims during this time period. These were likely women in Washington and California, but without confessions or bodies, we may never know the true count. 1974. The year everything exploded. This was when Bundy's killing spree went into overdrive. He was in his late 20s, attending law school, and on the outside he looked like he had it all together. But behind closed doors, he was hunting Lynda Ann Healy. February 1st, 1974. Lynda was a 21-year-old psychology student and radio announcer. She was sleeping in her basement bedroom when Bundy broke in through the window in the middle of the night. He bludgeoned her with a metal rod while she slept, then dressed her unconscious body in jeans and a shirt, and carried her out like she was his girlfriend. Her roommates upstairs didn't hear a thing. When they checked her room the next morning, the bed was made, but there was blood soaked through the mattress and pillowcase. Police found a small piece of flesh on the bedsheet. Her skull was discovered a year later on Taylor Mountain along with the remains of 3 other women. This showed how bold Bundy was from the start. He broke into homes while people were sleeping just feet away. Donna Gail Manson, March 12, 1974. Donna was a 19-year-old student at Evergreen State College. She left her dorm to attend a jazz concert on campus at 7 p.m. and was never seen again. She didn't take her wallet or coat, which meant she planned to come back quickly. Bundy later confessed to abducting and killing her, but refused to say where he disposed of her body. To this day, her remains have never been found. This was his pattern. Take them when they're alone. Leave no evidence. Keep moving. Susan Elaine Rancourt, April 17, 1974. Susan was an 18-year-old biology student at Central Washington State College. She went to an evening advisors meeting and then to a movie on campus. Around 9 p.m., she started walking back to her dorm. She never made it. Multiple witnesses reported seeing a man with his arm in a sling, struggling to carry books, and asking female students for help getting to his car. That was Bundy's signature move. He would fake an injury, wear a cast, or use crutches, and play the helpless victim. Women trusted him because he looked clean-cut, polite, and harmless. The moment they got close to his tan Volkswagen Beetle, he would strike them over the head with a crowbar, shove them in the car, and drive off. Susan's skull was found on Taylor Mountain with clear blunt force trauma to the back of the head. Roberta Kathleen Parks, May 6, 1974. Kathy was a 20-year-old student at Oregon State University. She was last seen walking from her dorm to the student union to meet friends for coffee. She vanished somewhere along that short walk. Bundy had expanded his hunting ground into Oregon. Her skull was discovered on Taylor Mountain alongside the others. Same method, same result. He was getting faster and more efficient with every kill. Brenda Carroll Ball, June 1st, 1974. Brenda was 22 years old and worked as a restaurant cook. She spent the evening at the Flame Tavern in Burien, Washington. Around 2 a.m., she left the bar to get some fresh air. Multiple witnesses saw her talking to a handsome man with his arm in a sling who was asking women for help carrying something to his car. She agreed to help him and walked toward the parking lot. That was the last time anyone saw her alive. Her remains were found on Taylor Mountain months later. Her skull showed the same brutal blunt force trauma pattern. Georgeann Hawkins, June 11th, 1974. This murder terrified everyone because it happened in the safest place imaginable. Georgeann was a straight-A student at the University of Washington. At 12:30 a.m., she left her boyfriend's fraternity house to walk back to her sorority. The distance was only 90 feet through a well-lit alley between two Greek houses. People were still awake, studying. There were witnesses everywhere, and yet she disappeared without a trace. One witness heard a high-pitched scream that lasted only 2 or 3 seconds, then nothing. Bundy later confessed the details. He was on crutches that night with a briefcase. He dropped the briefcase near Georgeann and asked for help, picking it up and carrying it to his car. The moment she bent down, he swung a crowbar and hit her over the head with full force. She was unconscious instantly. He threw her in his Beetle and drove off. The entire abduction took less than 10 seconds. Her remains were found a year later on Taylor Mountain. This murder showed just how quick, calculated, and efficient Bundy had become. He could snatch someone in seconds, even in a crowded area, and nobody would notice until it was too late. Janice Ann Ott and Denise Marie Naslund, July 14th, 1974. This was the day Bundy made his biggest mistake, and it's what eventually led police to him. It was a beautiful sunny Sunday at Lake Sammamish State Park. Thousands of people were there swimming, picnicking, and enjoying the weather. Around noon, witnesses saw a good-looking man with his arm in a sling walking around asking women for help. He was introducing himself as Ted and asking for help loading a sailboat onto his car. Most women said no and walked away. But 23-year-old Janice Ott agreed. She told her friends she'd be right back and walked off with him toward the parking lot. She was never seen alive again. A few hours later, 19-year-old Denise Naslund left her group to use the restroom. She never returned. Bundy had taken 2 women in broad daylight from a crowded public park within hours of each other. Their skeletal remains were found together at the same location in September, along with a third unidentified femur bone that has never been matched to anyone. This was the turning point. Witnesses gave police descriptions of a man named Ted driving a tan Volkswagen Beetle. The composite sketch looked exactly like Bundy. Multiple people who knew him, including his girlfriend and co-workers, called in tips saying it looked like him. But police didn't take it seriously at first because Ted Bundy was a law student with no criminal record. He didn't fit the profile. Moving to Utah, fall 1974. After the Lake Sammamish incident, Bundy knew the heat was on him in Washington. So he enrolled in law school at the University of Utah and moved to Salt Lake City in September 1974. But the killing didn't stop. In fact, it got worse. Nancy Wilcox, October 2nd, 1974. Nancy was 16 years old when she disappeared in Holiday, Utah. She was last seen riding in a Volkswagen Beetle. Bundy confessed to this murder years later, but never revealed where he disposed of her body. Her remains have never been found. Melissa Ann Smith, October 18th, 1974. Melissa was 17 years old and the daughter of the Midvale police chief. She left a pizza restaurant where she'd been with friends and started walking home around 10 p.m. She never made it. 9 days later, her body was found in the mountains near Salt Lake City. She had been SA'd, sodomized, and strangled with a nylon stocking. Her skull was fractured. The medical examiner said she had been kept alive for several days before being killed. This was a new level of brutality. He wasn't just killing quickly anymore. He was keeping them alive to torture them. Laura Ann Aime, October 31st, 1974. Laura was 17 years old and disappeared on Halloween night after leaving a cafe in Lehi, Utah. Her nude body was found a month later in a canyon. She had been beaten so severely that her skull was fractured in multiple places. She had been SA'd and strangled. The autopsy revealed that she had been alive for days after her abduction, meaning Bundy kept her somewhere and tortured her before finally killing her. Carol DaRonch, November 8th, 1974. The one who escaped. Not all of Bundy's attempts were successful, and this woman's survival helped bring him down. Carol DaRonch was 18 years old and shopping at a mall in Murray, Utah. A man approached her claiming to be a police officer named Officer Roseland. He told her someone had tried to break into her car and asked her to come with him to the station to file a report. She got into his Volkswagen Beetle, but something felt wrong. He drove away from the police station instead of toward it. When he pulled over, he tried to handcuff her. She fought back with everything she had. He pulled out a crowbar and swung at her head, but she blocked it with her arm. She managed to get the car door open and threw herself out while it was still moving. She ran into traffic screaming, and a passing couple stopped to help her. She survived. She gave police a detailed description and later identified Bundy in a lineup. Victim. But that same night, just hours after the failed DaRonch abduction, 17-year-old Deborah Jean Kent disappeared from a high school parking lot in Bountiful, Utah. She went to pick up her brother from a school play and never came back. Her remains have never been found, but Bundy later confessed to killing her. Caryn Eileen Campbell, January 12, 1975. Caryn was 23 years old and on a ski vacation in Snowmass, Colorado with her fiancé and his 2 children. They were staying at the Wildwood Inn. Around 8:30 p.m., Caryn left the lounge to go back to her room to grab a magazine. She walked down the hallway and vanished. Her nude, frozen body was found 36 days later along a dirt road about 3 miles from the resort. She had been SA'd and beaten. Her skull was fractured from blunt force trauma. Bundy had been stalking the resort, watching families, and waiting for someone to be alone for just a moment. That's all it took. Julie Ray Cunningham, March 15, 1975. Julie was 26 years old and disappeared while walking to meet a friend in Vail, Colorado. Bundy later confessed that he approached her on crutches and asked for help carrying ski boots to his car. The moment she agreed, he knocked her unconscious, threw her in his car, and drove to a remote area where he strangled her. He never revealed where he disposed of her body, and her remains have never been found. Denise Lynn Oliverson, April 6, 1975. Denise was 25 years old and vanished while riding her bike to her parents' house in Grand Junction, Colorado. Her bike and sandals were found under a viaduct, but she was gone. Bundy confessed to her murder but refused to say where her body was. She has never been found. Lynette Dawn Culver, May 6, 1975. This one is especially horrific because Lynette was only 12 years old. She disappeared from a junior high school playground in Pocatello, Idaho. Bundy admitted to abducting her, taking her to a hotel room, SAing her, and then drowning her in the bathtub. He never revealed where he disposed of her body. Her remains have never been found. This showed that Bundy had no boundaries. Children were not off limits. Shelley K. Robertson, July 1st, 1975. Shelley was 24 years old when she disappeared in Golden, Colorado. Her remains were found in August on a mountainside. Bundy later confessed to her murder but gave no details. Nancy Baird, possibly July 1975. Nancy was 23 and worked at a gas station in Farmington, Utah. She disappeared and was never found. Bundy is suspected but never confessed. The arrest, August 16, 1975. Bundy's luck finally ran out when Utah Highway Patrol Sergeant Bob Hayward spotted a Volkswagen Beetle driving through a residential neighborhood at 2:30 a.m. with its headlights off. When he tried to pull the car over, it sped away and ran multiple stop signs before finally stopping. The driver was Ted Bundy. Inside the car, police found handcuffs, a ski mask, a crowbar, rope, an ice pick, and garbage bags. Bundy claimed he was just driving around because he couldn't sleep. He was arrested, and Carol DaRonch identified him in a lineup as the man who tried to abduct her. In 1976, he was convicted of aggravated kidnapping and sentenced to 1 to 15 years in prison. But Colorado wanted him for murder. The first escape, June 7th, 1977. While awaiting trial for the Caryn Campbell murder in Aspen, Colorado, Bundy was allowed to visit the courthouse library to research his own defense. He was not handcuffed or shackled because he was representing himself and they thought he was just a kidnapper, not a killer. During a recess, when the guards weren't looking, Bundy opened a window and jumped out from the second floor. He sprained his ankle but managed to run into the mountains. He stole a car and drove to Aspen, where he broke into a cabin and lived there for 6 days. He was eventually caught after getting lost in the mountains and flagged down by police. But this wasn't his last escape. The second escape, December 30th, 1977. This escape was more elaborate and more dangerous. Bundy was being held in the Glenwood Springs jail, awaiting his murder trial. Over several weeks, he had been starving himself to lose weight. He also used a hacksaw blade, smuggled to him by other inmates, to cut a small hole in the ceiling of his cell. On the night of December 30th, while guards were distracted, Bundy squeezed through the hole, crawled through the ceiling space, and dropped down into a jailer's apartment that was empty. He walked out the front door of the jail, dressed in civilian clothes, and disappeared. He had 15 hours before anyone noticed he was gone. On the run, the most brutal period. Bundy stole a car and drove to Chicago, then flew to Michigan, and finally took a bus to Tallahassee, Florida. For the first time in his life, he was truly free, with no one looking for him, and he used that freedom to commit his most horrific crimes yet. The Chi Omega Massacre, January 15th, 1978. At around 3 a.m., Bundy broke into the Chi Omega sorority house at Florida State University through a back door that had been left unlocked. In less than 15 minutes, he attacked 4 women while they slept in their rooms. This wasn't careful, calculated killing. This was a frenzied, violent rampage. Margaret Bowman, 21 years old, was strangled with pantyhose and beaten so violently with a wooden log that her skull was crushed. She died in her sleep. Lisa Levy, 20 years old, was strangled, beaten, and essayed. Bundy bit her left buttock and one of her nipples so hard that it left clear bite impressions. These bite marks would later be the key evidence that convicted him. She died at the scene. Caryn Chandler and Kathy Kleiner, both 21, were brutally beaten with a wooden club while they slept. Caryn's skull was fractured, her jaw was broken, and she lost several teeth. Kathy's jaw was shattered and she needed extensive reconstructive surgery. Both women survived but were permanently injured. The entire attack lasted less than 15 minutes. Bundy then ran a few blocks away to another apartment building. Cheryl Thomas, January 15th, 1978, same night. About 30 minutes after the Chi Omega attacks, Bundy broke into the apartment of Cheryl Thomas, a 21-year-old dance student who lived just 8 blocks away. He beat her over the head with a wooden club so severely that her skull was fractured in 5 places. She survived but lost hearing in one ear, suffered permanent equilibrium damage, and could no longer dance. Neighbors heard strange thumping sounds, but didn't investigate until morning. By then, Bundy was long gone. Kimberly Diane Leach, February 9th, 1978. His final victim. This was Bundy's last murder, and it's one of the most heartbreaking. Kimberly was 12 years old and in the 7th grade at Lake City Junior High School in Florida. On February 9th, she left her homeroom class to go back to her locker to get her purse. She never returned. Witnesses saw a man matching Bundy's description, leading a crying girl toward a white van in the school parking lot. Her body was found 8 weeks later in an abandoned pig shed about 35 miles from the school. She had been SA'd and her throat had been cut. The autopsy revealed that she had been dead for several weeks, meaning Bundy kept her alive for days before finally killing her. This was his last victim. The final arrest, February 15th, 1978. 3 days after taking Kimberly Leach, Bundy was driving a stolen orange Volkswagen Beetle through Pensacola, Florida. A police officer ran the plates and realized it was stolen. He pulled Bundy over. When the officer approached, Bundy kicked the door open and tried to run. There was a physical struggle. The officer tackled him, and it took 3 officers to finally restrain him. When they searched him, he had 21 stolen credit cards in his pocket. At first, he gave a fake name, but eventually his fingerprints came back, and police realized they had just caught America's most wanted fugitive. The trials and conviction. Bundy's trial for the Chi Omega murders began in June 1979, and it was one of the first trials ever broadcast on national television. The evidence against him was overwhelming. Witnesses placed him at the sorority house. Fibers from the Chi Omega house were found in his stolen car. His stolen credit card receipts showed he was in the area. But the most damning evidence was the bite marks on Lisa Levy's body. Forensic odontologists took impressions of Bundy's teeth and compared them to the bite marks. They were a perfect match. The teeth impressions showed unique characteristics, including chipped teeth and misalignment that matched Bundy's dental records exactly. There was no doubt. He was convicted of 2 counts of first-degree murder and 3 counts of attempted murder. He was sentenced to death. In 1980, Bundy was tried for the murder of Kimberly Leach. Again, the evidence was overwhelming. Witnesses placed him at the school. Fibers from Kimberly's clothing were found in his van. Semen samples matched his blood type. He was convicted and sentenced to death again. Death row confessions. For over 10 years, Bundy sat on death row. During that time, he gave interviews to FBI agents, psychologists, and journalists. He confessed to 30 murders across 7 states, but investigators believe the real number is much higher, possibly over 100. He described in detail how he would stalk women, how he chose his victims, and what he did to them. He admitted to revisiting the bodies after death to perform acts of necrophilia. He kept severed heads in his apartment as trophies. He sometimes applied makeup to the corpses and slept next to them. The depravity was endless. But even in his confessions, Bundy played games. He would dangle information in front of investigators, offering to reveal burial sites of missing women in exchange for more time. He used the family's pain as leverage to delay his execution. He was manipulative until the very end. Execution, January 24th, 1989. At 7:16 a.m., Ted Bundy was strapped into the electric chair at Florida State Prison. His last words were an apology to the families of his victims. At 7:16 a.m., 2,000 volts of electricity surged through his body. He was pronounced dead minutes later. He was 42 years old. Outside the prison, hundreds of people gathered holding signs that read, "Burn Bundy, burn, and thank God it's Friday." They cheered when the execution was announced. It was one of the few times in modern history where a criminal's death was publicly celebrated.